Look at a dollar bill, not the front, the back. On the left side, a pyramid stands with no capstone, and floating directly above it is an eye trapped inside a triangle. Below it read the Latin words Novus Ordo Seclorum. If you search this online, thousands of websites and documentaries will tell you it translates to one terrifying phrase: New World Order. The internet insists the eye watches everything. The pyramid represents a ruthless global hierarchy, and the Latin text is their ultimate mission statement. It has been sitting in wallets since 1935, hiding in plain sight. Search Illuminati on YouTube, and you are instantly flooded with videos boasting hundreds of millions of views. You see massive celebrities throwing up triangle hand signs at stadium concerts, pop stars covering one eye in calculated promotional shoots, and leaked footage of bizarre rituals taking place deep within the California redwoods. Anonymous accounts link powerful CEOs, influential world presidents, and iconic musicians to a single symbol, a single shadowy organization, a single word: Illuminati. The narrative is incredibly seductive. It tells a story of a centuries-old secret society embedded within every sovereign government, every multi-billion-dollar megacorporation, and every elite awards show green room on the planet. They are blamed for starting revolutions, crashing global economies, and printing their occult symbols on our money just to dare us to notice. They are the ultimate answer to why the modern world feels so chaotic and confusing. Or, depending on who you ask, they are the reason it makes far too much sense. This narrative assures us that nothing is an accident. Everything is meticulously designed, and if you can just map the pattern, you can finally see who is pulling the strings. It is a phenomenal story. The only problem is that almost none of it is true. The historical Illuminati was actually founded on May 1st, 1776. It did not form in a secret underground chamber, a Gothic cathedral, or a medieval castle. It was started in a modest university classroom by a 28-year-old law professor named Adam Weishaupt and just 4 of his students. They met in Ingolstadt, Bavaria, a town most people today still couldn't find on a map. At their absolute peak, they grew to roughly 2,000 members and existed for a grand total of 9 years. In that brief window, they overthrew no governments, replaced no major world religions, and crashed no financial systems. They were completely shut down by local Bavarian authorities. Their private apartments were raided, and their internal papers were seized and published for the public to read. Weishaupt spent the last 45 years of his life exiled in a quiet German town, writing dense philosophical essays that virtually no one read until he died in 1830. The order has been dead for centuries. Every single internal document they ever produced, their secret ciphers, their complete membership rosters, and even their private letters complaining about each other's laziness, is entirely public available. You can read them yourself, yet almost nobody does. So how did a failed student club from a provincial university transform into the most famous conspiracy theory in human history? How did an organization that historically accomplished absolutely nothing become the grand explanation for everything? To understand that, we must go back to the beginning, to the brilliant, impatient man who started it all, in a country that was deeply terrified of new ideas. To understand Adam Weishaupt, you must first understand that he was entirely raised and educated by the Jesuits. Following the early death of his father, Johann Georg Weishaupt, a law professor at the University of Ingolstadt, Adam's education was taken over by his godfather, Baron Johann Adam von Eichstätt. Eichstätt was a staunch Enlightenment rationalist who spent years quietly fighting the Jesuit stranglehold on Bavarian academia. Despite his godfather's leanings, young Adam still attended strict Jesuit schools. He completely absorbed their rigid discipline, their hierarchical thinking, and their incredible talent for structuring absolute human obedience. He internalized their methods without the critical distance needed to see what he was becoming. In the mid-18th century, Ingolstadt was a conservative university town dominated heavily by the Catholic Church. The Jesuits controlled the entire curriculum, deciding which books were safe and which were dangerous contraband. Even after the Pope formally dissolved the Jesuit order in 1773, their deep institutional networks remained structurally intact underneath Bavarian society, like powerful roots spreading beneath pavement. Weishaupt excelled within this demanding system. By 25, he secured the prestigious chair of canon law at Ingolstadt, becoming the first non-Jesuit to hold that position in over a century. The remaining academic faculty, heavily populated by former Jesuits, deeply resented his appointment. Weishaupt found himself an interloper, completely surrounded by men who wanted him gone, teaching a system of church law he fundamentally wished to dismantle. He knew the Jesuit machinery from the inside, how they built fierce loyalty, compartmentalized information, and used strict hierarchy to govern human behavior. He decided he needed to build a structure of his own to fight back, something the Jesuits couldn't see, couldn't infiltrate, and couldn't stop. During his 20s, Weishaupt secretly devoured the banned works of French philosophers like Voltaire and Rousseau, who argued that human affairs should be governed by rational reason rather than Holy Scripture. In Paris and London, these ideas were mainstream. In conservative Bavaria, they could instantly ruin a career. Weishaupt didn't just want to read these ideas, he wanted a practical network to spread them. He needed to quietly plant like-minded people inside universities, government offices, and churches to gradually shift the institutions from within. He first looked at Freemasonry. Their lodges already existed across Europe, offering ready-made meeting halls, initiation rituals, and an established culture of secrecy. They included the exact class of aristocrats and intellectuals Weishaupt wanted to target. However, he encountered two major hurdles. First, Masonic dues and regalia were far too expensive for a young professor living on a modest academic salary. Second, Weishaupt found Freemasonry completely obsessed with mystical symbolism and esoteric rituals, which he dismissed as useless intellectual decoration. He wanted real societal change, not symbols. So he decided to build his own secret society from scratch. Institutions from within. He first looked at Freemasonry. Their lodges already existed across Europe, offering ready-made meeting halls, initiation rituals, and an established culture of secrecy. They included the exact class of aristocrats and intellectuals Weishaupt wanted to target. However, he encountered two major hurdles. First, Masonic dues and regalia were far too expensive for a young professor living on a modest academic salary. Second, Weishaupt found Freemasonry completely obsessed with mystical symbolism and esoteric rituals, which he dismissed as useless intellectual decoration. He wanted real societal change, not symbols. So he decided to build his own secret society from scratch. Weishaupt outlined goals that were incredibly abstract and typical of an academic who spent his life reading philosophy. The order would fiercely oppose superstition, combat the deliberate restriction of knowledge by religious authorities, and fight abuses of state power. The method of cellular infiltration was highly specific. Recruitment was meticulously selective. Members were educated in strict, distinct stages, with the true purpose of the order only being revealed at the highest levels. Total obedience to superiors was mandatory, and all information flowed exclusively upward. Lower-ranking members had no idea who led the tiers above them. The profound irony was that this system was an exact structural duplicate of the Jesuit machine, the very order founded to destroy secretive, hierarchical, obedience-based control was itself secretive, hierarchical, and demanded unconditional obedience. To protect the organization, Weishaupt layered it in fiction. He chose his own code name first, Spartacus, named after the famous gladiator who led a massive slave revolt against the Roman Republic. Every recruit was forced to abandon their legal name upon initiation, adopting a classical pseudonym like Ajax or Tamerlane. If authorities ever intercepted their mail, they would only find messages between ancient historical figures, pointing nowhere. They completely remapped the geography of Europe, giving cities classical aliases. Ingolstadt became Eleusis, Munich became Athens, and Vienna became Rome. They went so far as to adopt a modified Persian calendar, meaning the dates in their correspondence matched no calendar used in Europe. Letters were written in complex ciphers addressed between pseudonyms, referencing fictional cities, and dated on an unrecognized calendar. It was a completely parallel world. While this system provided brilliant operational security, it carried a massive psychological cost. Members who spent years interacting through this closed network began to fully inhabit the fiction. The parallel world became their primary reality. Their code names felt more genuine than their legal identities. The classical map replaced the real geography of their daily lives. The Illuminati became a private universe, where educated men could step outside the oppressive realities of Bavarian society and become the grand historical figures they believed they were destined to be. But Weishaupt's private letters revealed that he was a man constantly at war with his own creation. Far from a cool, detached mastermind, his correspondence shows an anxious, arrogant, and deeply insecure academic. He ran the secret society like a frustrated department head, issuing harsh instructions and treating his subordinates as if they were incapable of independent thought. When recruitment slowed down, he furiously accused his members of laziness. When they questioned his methods, he branded them as disloyal. He worried incessantly about government informers and demanded incredibly intrusive reports on the private lives of new recruits. He was a young intellectual operating entirely within a faculty lounge mindset, dreaming of an Enlightenment revolution he had absolutely no practical means of executing. The recruitment process he designed was terrifyingly effective at turning self-disclosure into organizational power. At the first degree, known as novice, a recruit was told nothing about the leadership or goals of the order. Instead, they were handed an exhausting questionnaire. They had to provide a complete inventory of every book they owned, list their closest friends, name their worst enemies, and detail their own moral, financial, and intellectual weaknesses. The novice was unknowingly building a comprehensive psychological dossier on himself. This data flowed straight to the top of the pyramid. The system was meticulously compartmentalized. A novice knew nothing of the Minerval above him, and a Minerval knew nothing of the higher degrees. This ensured that if a lower member was arrested, he could only betray his own questionnaire and the single person who recruited him. But Weishaupt also understood that a member who hands over his deepest vulnerabilities to an invisible organization has handed over the exact tools required to control him. The self-dossier was a permanent insurance policy against disloyalty. Though billions of people today associate the Illuminati with the eye inside the triangle, they never once used that symbol. Their actual emblem was the Owl of Minerva, the Roman goddess of wisdom and strategy. It appeared on official documents and marked the core degree of Minerval. The initiation ceremony for this degree was designed to be deeply emotional and irreversible. A candidate was led into a pitch-black, windowless room and left completely alone in total silence for 15 minutes to build intense psychological anxiety. While Weishaupt's three-tier system worked perfectly for a handful of students, it lacked the depth to expand across Europe. In 1780, a brilliant new architect named Adolf von Knigge joined the order. Knigge was everything Weishaupt was not. He was a traveled aristocrat with deep political connections across the German states, and crucially, he was a senior Freemason who understood the internal rivalries and structures of Masonic lodges. While Weishaupt stayed in Ingolstadt writing angry letters, Knigge walked into elite rooms and effortlessly recruited the powerful people inside them. Knigge realized that the order was currently just a small philosophy club pretending to be a global conspiracy. To fix this, he completely rebuilt the Illuminati into an ambitious 13-degree structure split into 3 distinct classes: the nursery, the Masonic degrees, and the mysteries. He strategically adapted 5 middle degrees directly from Freemasonry. He understood that because many recruits were already Freemasons, a familiar hierarchy would make joining the Illuminati seamless. But while traditional Masonic degrees focused on abstract brotherhood, the Illuminati repurposed them to demand strict organizational obedience. Above these sat the mysteries, where the higher philosophical goals were revealed, leading up to the theoretical apex of mage and king. In reality, the rituals for these top tiers were never actually written. The architecture of the Grand Pyramid outran its content. Lower members assumed the levels above contained profound cosmic secrets, but in reality, those upper rooms contained nothing but unfinished paperwork and fierce arguments between Weishaupt and Knigge. Knigge's expansion strategy was beautifully parasitic. Instead of building a brand new network from scratch, he decided to graft the Illuminati directly onto the existing infrastructure of European Freemasonry. In 1779, the Illuminati quietly gained total control of the Lodge of Theodore of Good Counsel in Munich. Illuminati agents joined the lodge individually, rose through the ranks, and systematically took over its leadership positions without firing a single shot. To the public, it still looked like an ordinary Masonic lodge, but its agenda was entirely dictated by Weishaupt's order. Knigge scaled this model across Germany. In the summer of 1782, elite Masons from across Europe gathered at the Congress of Wilhelmsbad to resolve an institutional crisis. Knigge attended as a respected delegate, but his hidden mission was to systematically recruit large leaders and block any centralization of Masonic authority that the Illuminati couldn't control. He succeeded masterfully. He dismantled the dominant Masonic rite of the time and brought influential lodge leaders from Germany, France, and beyond directly into the Illuminati's orbit. This was the absolute high watermark of the order. The Illuminati had successfully penetrated the administrative and ruling class of the German-speaking world. Their ranks now secretly included university professors, high-ranking military officers, powerful government ministers, lawyers, doctors, and reigning dukes like Ernest II of Saxe-Gotha. Even Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, one of the most celebrated literary giants in European history, was initiated into the order. The Illuminati did not recruit from the margins of society. They recruited from the absolute center of institutional power. But this rapid success created a massive footprint, and footprints can be followed. The entire organization was built on a culture of total internal surveillance. Every member was required to constantly spy on the members beneath him, transcribing their private conversations, monitoring what books they read, and reporting it upward. Weishaupt called this process illumination, the systematic dissolution of the private self into the permanent organizational record. A member could never truly relax because no interaction was ever off the record. While some ambitious men thrived under the surveillance, others grew deeply uneasy. The intense paranoia within the order eventually triggered a fatal rift at the very top. Weishaupt demanded absolute authority, viewing the entire expanded network as an extension of his personal vision. Knigge, who had actually built the functioning network, demanded autonomy for his elite recruits. Their relationship deteriorated into bitter, petty arguments, and in 1784, a disgusted Knigge completely withdrew from the order, signing an agreement to remain silent. The Illuminati had just lost its primary engine and its greatest recruit. The collapse of the Illuminati did not happen because a brilliant government agency exposed them. It happened because their own disillusioned members gave them away. Former members, exhausted by the constant internal spying and micromanagement, began speaking to the clergy and writing detailed letters to the authorities. Karl Theodor, the Elector of Bavaria, was a staunch Catholic ruler who became deeply alarmed by reports of a secret society operating within his own government that explicitly sought to dismantle the political power of the Church. In 1784, he issued a general edict banning all unauthorized secret societies. The Illuminati, suffering from severe internal disorganization, foolishly ignored the warning shot and continued to meet. On March 2, 1785, Karl Theodor issued a second explicit edict banning the Illuminati by name and making membership a serious criminal offense. The order fractured instantly. Facing a direct choice between their secret identities and their public careers, the vast majority of civil servants, military officers, and academics immediately abandoned the society. The hierarchy that had been beautifully designed to pass information efficiently upward now passed letters of resignation efficiently downward. Then came the devastating police raids. In October 1786, authorities raided the home of Franz Xaver von Zwock, a top Illuminati administrator known internally as Kedo. Zwock had failed to secure the order's most sensitive archives. Police seized the ciphers, the Persian calendar, the geographical keys, and thousands of pages of raw internal correspondence. Even worse, they found radical essays defending atheism, sympathetic discussions of suicide, and literal recipes for invisible ink. A second raid in May 1787 at the castle of Baron Thomas Maria de Bassus uncovered Weishaupt's own strategic letters detailing his long-term plans for institutional infiltration. The Bavarian government suddenly possessed the most complete, raw archive of a secret society in human history. Instead of hiding the evidence in a secure vault, the government made a highly calculated move. They published everything. In 1787, they released the seized documents in 2 massive volumes for anyone to buy and read. Their goal was to completely humiliate the order and prove to the public that the ban was legally and morally justified. The exposure completely destroyed the Illuminati's credibility, but it also did something the government never intended. It preserved the order in print forever. Because the raw documents were published, anyone with an agenda could buy them, quote them, and reinterpret them. Every single conspiracy theory that followed over the next 2 centuries, every claim that the Illuminati survived, ran global banking, or orchestrated historical events, derived its artificial plausibility from these genuine published texts. The theorists could point to real letters, quote real ciphers, and reference real names. The foundation was entirely factual. The terrifying interpretations built on top of it were completely fabricated. Adam Weishaupt was stripped of his university professor title and permanently banished from Bavaria. He fled across the border to Gotha, living out his remaining 45 years under the protection of Duke Ernest II. He spent his final decades writing desperate defenses of his character and dense philosophical essays that attracted virtually no audience. He died in total obscurity in 1830 at 82 years old. There is absolutely no credible historical evidence of any Illuminati activity anywhere in the world after 1785. The machine completely stopped. Its total historic achievement, measured against its grand goals, was exactly 0. The story should have naturally ended there as a minor footnote in European history, but in 1797, 12 years after the order collapsed, the modern conspiracy theory was born. A French Jesuit priest named Augustin Barruel published a massive 4-volume work arguing that the French Revolution of 1789 was not a spontaneous uprising against a corrupt monarchy, but a highly coordinated plot engineered by the underground remnants of the Illuminati. Barruel faced a glaring logical problem. There was absolutely no evidence the Illuminati ever operated in France, and no revolutionary leaders were ever listed on their rolls. Barruel solved this problem with a stroke of genius that defines all modern conspiracy thinking. He treated the absolute absence of evidence as the ultimate proof of the conspiracy's genius. He argued that a truly effective secret society wouldn't just vanish because a government banned it. It would simply shed its name, go deep underground, and continue operating through proxy organizations and front groups. This argument was completely unfalsifiable. If evidence of the Illuminati existed, the conspiracy was proven. If no evidence existed, it proved they were hiding perfectly. In the exact same year, a respected Scottish scientist and Freemason named John Robison independently published a book reaching the exact same conclusion. Because a French priest and a Scottish scientist had both identified the same hidden hand without collaborating, the public viewed the narrative as undeniably credible. Barruel and Robison had successfully invented a portable narrative machine. Before them, conspiracy theories were always bound to specific events and individual actors. The Illuminati template was completely different. It was a reusable narrative technology that could be lifted out of the French Revolution and dropped onto any major world crisis. All you had to do was substitute the variable. The Illuminati were blamed for the Congress of Vienna, the European revolutions of 1848, and eventually the horrors of the First World War. The pattern could never be disproven because every historical event was forced to fit the template. By 1798, this narrative machine crossed the Atlantic. High-ranking American clergymen, including Jedediah Morse and the president of Yale University, Timothy Dwight, delivered passionate sermons warning their congregations that the Illuminati had successfully infiltrated American institutions. The Federalist Party instantly weaponized this panic, publicly accusing Thomas Jefferson and his Democratic Republicans of being Illuminati agents trying to import the violent chaos of the French Revolution into the young American Republic. The scare lasted 2 years before fizzling out, but it established the permanent pattern of using the Illuminati as a partisan political weapon to completely delegitimize opponents. Over the 19th century, this single template fractured into 3 distinct cultural branches that remain highly active today. The political branch, used by conservatives to brand any liberal reform as a hidden path to global domination. The religious branch, which framed the Illuminati not as mere political actors, but as literal agents of Satan working to destroy Christianity. And the deeply dangerous anti-Semitic branch. In 1806, a forged letter was circulated, falsely linking Jewish people to the Illuminati conspiracy. This fabrication systematically grew over the decades, culminating in the early 20th century with the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, a malicious forgery by the Russian secret police that stole the structural architecture of the Illuminati template and attached it to Jewish people, a text that the Nazi regime later used to justify the systematic murder of millions. The enduring survival of this myth has fascinated political scientists and historians for decades. In 1964, historian Richard Hofstadter famously identified this mode of thinking as the paranoid style, a recurring feature of democratic politics that activates whenever a population feels intense anxiety about rapid societal change. Political scientist Michael Barkon noted that all conspiracy thinking relies on 3 core principles. Nothing happens by accident, nothing is as it seems, and everything is connected. The Illuminati myth persists because it performs an incredibly vital psychological function. It effortlessly transforms overwhelming global complexity into simple, direct intent. It replaces the profound discomfort of living in a world shaped by random, impersonal structural forces with the stark clarity of a world run by a hidden hand. This total disregard for historical accuracy is perfectly illustrated by the symbol everyone associates with them, the Eye of Providence. Its real history has absolutely nothing to do with Weishaupt's order. The eye inside a triangle surrounded by rays of light is an ancient Christian artistic symbol representing God's benevolent oversight of humanity. It appeared in European churches for centuries before Ingolstadt even existed. In 1776, a Swiss artist proposed it for the Great Seal of the United States, simply to signal that the birth of the new nation was blessed by divine guidance. The seal was adopted in 1782, while the real Illuminati were operating exclusively in Bavaria, with zero presence in America. The Freemasons didn't even adopt the eye until 1797, long after the Illuminati were suppressed. When the symbol was printed on the back of the U.S. $1 bill in 1935, it was done to represent the New Deal era under divine providence. Yet the conspiracy narrative completely detached the symbol from its documented Christian and patriotic history, repeatedly paired it with the word Illuminati, and transformed it into the ultimate corporate logo for global surveillance. The same fabrication occurred with the Latin motto, Novus Ordo Seclorum. Conspiracy circles translate it as New World Order, but the actual classical translation is a New Order of the Ages, coined by a classicist from the poetry of Virgil to celebrate the historic beginning of the American era. The word ordo in Latin means a sequence or arrangement, not a system of authoritarian control. The 13 steps of the pyramid simply represented the 13 original colonies. The year 1776 at the base celebrated the Declaration of Independence, sharing a year with the Illuminati's founding by pure historical coincidence. The conspiracy narrative ignores every shred of public record, opting to replace documented history with an unfalsifiable myth. In the late 1950s, the myth took a bizarre turn when 2 pranksters in California invented a satirical religion called Discordianism, dedicated to the Greek goddess of chaos. They launched Operation Mindfuck, a deliberate attempt to flood the media with fake conspiracy theories and elaborate hoaxes to make the concept of certain knowledge completely impossible. The Illuminati became their favorite joke vehicle. They forged fake Illuminati letters and pamphlets, sending them to major newspapers and politicians just to watch the panic spread. This countercultural prank culminated in 1975, when editors Robert Anton Wilson and Robert Shea published the Illuminatus trilogy. These dense, satirical novels blended every conspiracy theory imaginable into a chaotic story where everything was simultaneously true and false. They popularized the 23 enigma, the paranoid idea that the number 23 appears with UE frequency in major world events. The authors intended to make conspiracy theories so funny and absurd that they would become harmless. Instead, the exact opposite happened. By making the Illuminati highly entertaining, they made the myth incredibly viral. The clever, ironic distance collapsed as the novels reached a mass audience who didn't understand the satire. Ironic repetition looks identical to sincere repetition. Every time a joke was made about the Illuminati running the world, it deeply embedded the concept of hidden control into the collective public subconscious. The joke successfully escaped the laboratory. By the early 2000s, author Dan Brown published Angels and Demons, transforming the Illuminati into a highly profitable mass-market product. He stripped away the actual history, using the name as a generic shortcut for a shadowy, high-tech antagonist. The word Illuminati no longer referred to anything historical. It became a marketable feeling that hidden forces run the visible world. Simultaneously, the myth found a powerful new cultural vehicle, the hip-hop industry. In 1995, rapper Prodigy of Mobb Deep recorded the line, "Illuminati want my mind, soul, and my body." Jay-Z sampled the track on his debut album, and Tupac Shakur titled his final album, The Don Killuminati. These urban artists weren't reading 18th century history. They were using the word as a raw vocabulary to describe the literal, everyday exploitation of the music business. They were young artists signing opaque contracts, surrendering their intellectual property to massive, invisible corporate boards, and watching executives generate millions from their labor. Calling the music industry the Illuminati wasn't historically accurate, but it served as a perfect shorthand for a real systemic experience of powerlessness. Within a decade, this vocabulary triggered a massive cultural obsession. Jay-Z and Beyoncé became the primary targets of intense online scrutiny. Because Jay-Z used a diamond shape as his record label's logo, conspiracy theorists immediately reinterpreted it as the all-seeing eye. Beyoncé's 2013 Super Bowl halftime show was intensely analyzed frame by frame as a public occult ritual. When Beyoncé explicitly dismissed the rumors in her 2016 song Formation, singing, "Y'all haters corny with that Illuminati mess," the internet treated the denial as the ultimate confirmation. In the closed loop of conspiracy logic, a denial is exactly what a secret society member is paid to say. Irony, silence, and denial are all absorbed as proof. The rumors were never about history. They were a collective cultural reaction to an uncomfortable question. How could anyone achieve that level of staggering historic success? A global secret society was simply a more dramatic and satisfying explanation than a decade of grueling recording sessions. The entertainment industry fully normalized the concept, treating the Illuminati the exact same way fantasy fiction treats dragons. A dragon in a video game doesn't need an origin story. It is a narrative shortcut signaling massive scale and forces beyond human control. Pop culture introduced them into games like Deus Ex, films like National Treasure, and literal superhero teams in Marvel Comics. By the early 2010s, the internet scaled the myth to its absolute peak with the Illuminati confirmed meme. People took completely mundane images, a slice of pizza, a triangular roof, a Dorito chip, circled the shape, and added the sarcastic caption. While intended as a joke against conspiracy logic, it systematically trained millions of young minds to perform the core cognitive operation of a conspiracy theorist: isolate a completely random shape, assign it a hidden, sinister meaning, and declare it proof of an invisible truth. By 2017, this exact same cognitive architecture birthed QAnon on 4chan. While it didn't mention the Illuminati by name, its structural DNA was a direct replica of Barul's 1797 model, a shadowy, unelected elite embedded within the deep state, operating behind a facade of legitimate government, sending coded messages to the chosen few, with an absolute absence of evidence serving as the ultimate proof of their power. When the global pandemic hit in 2020, the exact same portable framework was instantly deployed to claim that lockdowns and vaccines were engineered by globalists to control populations. The names change across centuries: Illuminati, cabal, deep state, globalists, but the cast, the plot, and the emotional payload remain perfectly fixed. The conspiracy theory has become permanent cultural infrastructure. The ultimate tragedy of this myth is that it makes real, documented elite influence completely unfixable by translating it into a supernatural fairy tale. Elite influence is a measurable, verifiable reality of modern democracy. Lobbying is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Regulatory capture routinely allows massive banking and pharmaceutical corporations to dictate the laws meant to government. The revolving door between government offices and private sector firms ensures the sane individuals write regulations and profit from them. Offshore tax havens legally shelter trillions of dollars from national systems. These are not wild conspiracy theories. They are structural, visible, and entirely legal systems documented by journalists and economists. Crucially, because they are legal systems, they are entirely fixable through practical democratic action, through campaign finance reform, strict transparency laws, and international tax loopholes closures. This is where the Illuminati myth becomes actively counterproductive. You cannot pass a piece of legislation against a shadow cabal. You cannot regulate a mystical secret society that exists only as a narrative. By replacing complex, structural, institutional failures with an imaginary, invincible enemy, the conspiracy theory completely siphons energy away from the actual visible mechanisms of power operating in plain sight. The world does not need a secret society to produce these outcomes. They are produced every day by incentive structures where money legally buys access, and access seamlessly shapes public policy. The historical Bavarian Illuminati lasted a mere 9 years, accomplished absolutely nothing, and collapsed under the weight of its own internal vanity. The history is completely settled, yet the name remains immortal. The idea cannot be killed because human beings are evolutionary pattern recognition machines, operating in a universe that is largely patternless. We evolved to instantly detect agency, to assume the rustling in the grass was a predator with intentions, because the ancestor who guessed wrong lost nothing, while the ancestor who assumed it was just the wind was occasionally eaten. We are the direct biological descendants of the hyper-vigilant ones who checked. We are hardwired to see faces in the dark and find coordinated plans behind tragedy. The alternative to the Illuminati myth is the terrifying realization of absolute randomness, that global financial systems collapse due to accumulated, unmanaged structural fragility, that global pandemics emerge from the cold intersection of biology and chance, that devastating world wars begin through cascading political miscalculations that absolutely no single actor intended. The true reality of the modern world is that it is not managed, it is not controlled, and it is not organized. It is an unimaginably complex system producing outcomes that absolutely no one designed and no one can predict. That is the true terror, the total absence of a master plan, the reality that nobody is at the wheel. The Illuminati myth is a desperate psychological refusal of that chaos. It is the comforting insistence that someone, somewhere, is at least holding the strings, even if they are evil, because an enemy with a plan can be fought, exposed, and eventually defeated. Chaos cannot. Randomness offers no target, no strategy, and no hope of resolution. The myth provides the one thing reality refuses to give us, the absolute certainty that the world makes sense.